Charles Darwin is probably, along with Karl Marx and Sigmund Freud, the most important figure in modern history. In fact, you could say even the tentacles of his influence reached right into the early 21st century. And in many ways, even though Darwin probably didn't intend it at the outset, Darwin Day in many ways has become many ways the opposite of Christmas Day. That's because Darwinism is often seen as the crux or the foundation for atheism. Because till Charles Darwin came along, people believed that the world, the universe, was created by a creator God. But when Charles Darwin postulated in his On the Origin of Species that life, or rather species, did not necessarily have to be created by God, but were a process of natural evolution, then very often people began to think that if there's no creator required, then you don't need a God. But the funny thing is that was not what Darwin set out to do when he first wrote his book. Because Darwin came from a family of quite theistic people who were believers. But by the time, and in fact the first few editions of his book had forewords written by bishops and believers telling them how evolution wedges in perfectly with the biblical and the Quranic God. But by the time the sixth edition of his book was published, Darwin had changed his mind. In fact, along with some of his acolytes, chiefs among them being Thomas Huxley, who was often called the bulldog of Charles Darwin, Darwin and what is called Darwinism became the crux of the atheist movement. But the funny thing is that nothing had changed between the sixth edition and the first edition of Darwin's book. What really changed was not the science, but the emotion. Because in the interim, Darwin had lost his favorite daughter, Annie. They say that she died in his arms. And therefore, Darwin's reason for converting from theism to atheism was not so much the science of evolution. Because till the fifth edition, he thought evolution fit in perfectly with the God idea. But the problem of suffering, what is called in philosophy theodicy. The logic being, if the innocent suffer, if good people suffer, that means God doesn't exist. But of course, we all no religion says there is no suffering in the world. Not the Buddha, not Jesus, not Muhammad, no religion says. In fact, what the best religions tell you is how to get through suffering in the best way possible, how to handle pain. But most of them, in fact, will tell you pain is essential. The universe would not exist if pain and evil doesn't exist. But having said that, Darwin has become so influential that it also defines how human relationships work. In fact, evolutionary psychology, the role of men in history as hunters and women in history as gatherers, defines practically everything we know about man-woman relationships today. Because we as a species, as Homo sapiens, is 250,000 years old. So therefore our psyche, our mind, what Greeks call our mind and our soul, is embedded in that 250,000-year-old species. But over the last 60 years or 70, with sexual revolution, birth control, women's liberation, and the empowerment of women in the workplace, things have changed so much that now the 250,000-year-old species is trying to find a new way in the man-woman relationships. Because the man-woman relationship was defined in one way by 250,000 years of history. But now, in the last 70 years, things have changed so much, we're trying to find a balance. And we're yet unable to find that balance, which is why the modern family is in such a, I would say, free fall. Divorce rates are up, loneliness is up, depression, mental illness is up. And in many countries around the world, especially let's say in America, for example, in many ethnicities, more than half the children grow up in broken homes. In fact, in single-parent homes, often to unwedded mothers and fathers. There will be a price to pay eventually because children need both mothers and fathers. But it's a long road until we find a way to marry the ethics of religion with the realities of evolutionary psychology. We will have a tough time, but I'm sure we'll get there. One good thing about human beings is we are very adaptable. We have something which very few animals have, a rational mind. And I'm sure we'll get there somewhere, because as we go along the way, we see that the pitfalls of broken relationships and families are too heavy to be borne. We'll find a way around it, hopefully, God willing. So what's your take on Darwin and his influence on relationships? So we all have relationships, guys. With the parents, with each other, with the lovers, with the husbands, wives, children. What's your take on it? By the way, if you like what you hear here, whether you agree or disagree, why don't you smash that button, subscribe, and comment below. I would love to hear what you want to say, because maybe I learned something, and hopefully you have learned something by listening to this video.